What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Today I am doing a bit of a viewer requested video, but a topic that I think could help you guys find a franchise, or rather a team that you guys might want to rebuild here in Madden 21. But like I said, it's a viewer requested video, so what I did was I put together a list of my top 10 teams that I think are begging for a rebuild here in Madden 21. Teams that I think you guys should explore doing a legitimate rebuild with. Certain teams I can imagine that you guys are going to agree with and are not going to agree with. So, in good fun, leave in the comment section which teams you agree with, which teams you disagree with, or teams that you might add to the list for potential rebuilds in Madden 21. But with that being said, we're going to jump into the list. And so the first team that we're going to look at is the New York Jets. The New York Jets, I think, are one of the obvious ones on this list. This is a roster that is pretty devoid of talent, if I were to sum it up correctly. This is a team that is tanking with a good quarterback in Sam Darnold, but tanking for what would potentially be a better quarterback in the draft. But honestly speaking, Sam Darnold is not the problem on this team. The problem on this team is just bad management and the fact that they don't really have talent across many of their important positions. I mean, they got rid of Le'Veon Bell, who could have been the answer at the halfback position if they had just addressed the offensive line, and they really don't have a whole lot across the offensive line. They have a couple of notable names across the offensive line, but outside of that, this offense just does not have much talent, and they haven't had talent for much time, and the defense, quite honestly, doesn't have a lot of talent either. They've traded away some of their high draft picks and released some of their high draft picks in recent memory. One of the only good players on their defensive front is Quinnen Williams with good potential, but with aging veterans like CJ Mosley being kind of the cornerstone of their defense, there just really is not a lot of talent on this team to be had, and I think this is one of the teams that is an obvious answer as a potential rebuild in Madden 21. And I think most people would agree that the Jets are one of the top teams to rebuild, one of the biggest challenges in the game. Now, the next team on this list that I want to cover is actually the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this may surprise you guys, but this is a team that, in my personal opinion, could use a definite retooling in the way they run their team and the way that they are managing their talent. Kind of at this point, I think that it is becoming a little bit more obvious to people that Carson Wentz isn't the answer. He has showed a lot of talent at points in his career, and this year he's having a pretty bad year. I think it could go either way, but personally speaking, if I wanted to do an interesting rebuild, I would consider the Eagles, because they have a lot of talent on their roster, but a lot of aging talent. When you look at guys like Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Brooks, Darius Slay, Lane Johnson, Brandon Graham, Zach Ertz. I mean, the top half of their roster is one of the older rosters in the NFL, and this is a team that, if you're not winning with a roster like this is a team that would be primed for a rebuild, a team that has a lot of capital that they can trade away for high draft picks or trade away for young players and things of that sort. And this is why I think this team would be a very good team to do a rebuild with, because of the uncertainty among their leader and their signal caller in Carson Wentz. They did bring in Jalen Hurts, so you have an option there. If you want to go with that young quarterback option, you don't really have to find one if you want to go with Jalen Hurts, and then you can focus on rebuilding some of the other areas of the team around him and kind of retooling this team to become younger. So I think the Eagles are a good option to take a look at. Now, I think some people might disagree with that because this team does have so much talent, but like I said, a lot of that talent is aging whenever you actually look at what's going on with the top half of their roster. The next team that I want to talk about is the Denver Broncos. I think the Denver Broncos might be another one that is kind of an obvious choice at this point. They do have some younger stars, guys like Justin Simmons that have played very well, and in recent times Melvin Gordon is playing really well, but realistically speaking, this team just doesn't have what it takes to, in my opinion, become a powerhouse team or a consistent success. Drew Lock, don't get me wrong, he has shown flashes of being good, but Drew Lock isn't it. I mean, he's just not the answer at quarterback for the Broncos, and the sooner that they realize that, the better. better. They're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, in my opinion, with Drew Lock, because this is a team that has all the talent in the world on the offensive side of the ball. They have Phillip Lindsay, who has shown to be a very effective running back when given the proper chances. Melvin Gordon has had success in this offense. They have a stable of effective and athletic and potentially game-changing wide receivers with Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Deshaun Hamilton. I mean, the list is extensive here at the wide receiver position. That's not even mentioning Tim Patrick, but lots of weapons there with Noah Fant and Albert O across the tight end group, and then across the offensive line, a couple of really good players in guys that have been, decent at least, in Garrett Bowles, Dalton Reisner, Cushenberry being a good rookie, Glasgow, Jawan James. I mean, this team has the tools there, and I think that it is clear to me, looking at their roster, that Drew Lock is not the answer when things are going wrong. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they obviously have aging talent like Jarrell Casey, Von Miller, and some players like an AJ Boye, a Bryce Callahan. I think that it's a team that, if they got younger on the defensive side of the ball and found the right quarterback, they could build this team into a long-term success. And so from that aspect, I think this would be a good team to rebuild by, finding a better quarterback and potentially revamping the defensive side of the ball to play a little bit differently. And I think that the Broncos are a good option for a rebuild, because let's be honest, with the competition in their division, they're not really going to be a success anytime soon, in my personal opinion. And so that's a good team to, have a good kind of 2-year rebuild, a good window there where you find your quarterback and then you rebuild that defense. The next team that we're going to talk about is actually the Bengals. Now, this one's interesting because they absolutely have their long-term solution at quarterback, but what I'll say is that the rest of this team is pretty much devoid of talent, much like the Jets. Now, they do have good players at the wide receiver position, with Tyler Boyd playing well, and then the emergence of players like T. Higgins and players like that. A.J. Green is on the downward end of his career. They do have Joe Mixon, though, at halfback, who has proven to be effective. They could use a good tight end and some help across the offensive line, but they have a lot of the building blocks on the offensive side of the ball. But now what I'll say is that they need a lot of help at other positions on the team, and as I scroll through here, you guys will see that they're really lacking quite a bit of talent across most of their important positions, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They do have good playmakers like William Jackson III and Jesse Bates, but that's not enough to get it done. And so if you're looking for a team that has some of the building blocks there, like a Joe Burrow, for example, and you're looking for a challenge in terms of rebuilding a defense, the Bengals are a team that I think is a very good option, because again, this is a team that you're going to have to focus on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of the good players are there on the offense that you don't really have to pay a lot of attention to that. So this is more of a defensive rebuild, in comparison to the others. And, you would have to help out your offensive line a little bit because they do struggle in that regard. The next team that I think that we should visit is the Texans. Now, this is for different reasons. This team does have talent. I mean, you're talking about a team, with Deshaun Watson, who's obviously a fantastic quarterback and shouldn't be going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, he should be the long-term solution here, and I don't think anybody disagrees. He's a fantastic quarterback. They have fantastic players to supplement him, and guys like Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller, who have emerged as really good players, and solid guys as well on the defensive side of the ball like Justin Reid, and J.J. Watt, who is aging there. But what I will say is that this is a team that just doesn't have success with their current formula. So while they have some of those building blocks like Deshaun Watson in place, I think this is a team that could use an overall retooling in terms of the way that they are going about the talent on their team. Whether that be a redistribution of talent and taking it away from some of the areas that are good and taking it away and, moving a player like a J.J. Watt in order to help out some of the other weak spots on the team. No matter which way you decide to go about it, I think that this is clearly a team that just hasn't found success with the way they are currently designed, and a team that, with them moving on from Bill O'Brien and things like that, is primed for a rebuild around Deshaun Deshaun Watson. I think that this team needs to be retold and remolded around Deshaun Watson. Sell off what they have now and bring in the right players to help Deshaun Watson continue to grow and allow him to be that great quarterback that we all know he can be if given the right opportunities. And that's why I like the Texans as a rebuild team in Madden 21. The next team is an obvious one. I think we can all agree that the Jacksonville Jaguars are a rebuild. Now, whether you decide to go with a Gardner Minshew as your long-term starter and try to build him up or anything of that nature, this is a team that it has a lot of young talent. It has a lot of high draft picks on it. Guys like DJ Chark, who is young and a very athletic wide receiver and can get the job done. Guys across their offensive line like Cam Robinson, that was an early round draft pick. Jawan Taylor on the defensive side of the ball. Josh Allen. I think what really just needs to be done here with the Jacksonville Jaguars is a continuation of the rebuild that is in process. We obviously know that they are in rebuild mode because they've sold off most of their good players. Guys like Yannick Ngakoue and whatnot. They've moved those players. They've moved Leonard Fournette, and we know that they're trying to retool their entire team. And so what is left to do here is to continue the rebuild process that is already in motion. And so this is an interesting one where you're not going to have to blow up the team and then rebuild them from that point. This team has already been pretty much blown up, and you have to just continue to build upon the rebuild that has happened to this point. And so that's why I think the Jaguars are an obvious team to rebuild here. Next, we're going to talk about probably a team that I might get hate for putting on this list, but the Cowboys. And the Cowboys, I think, are on here for a very deserving reason. The way that the team is constructed, they are not successful. And with their players being healthy, I know that this will be the argument with Dak Prescott healthy, with their players being healthy, they are a good team. But what I will say is their defense has certainly underperformed to this point, at least in recent years. I think that their defense at the very least could use a retooling. I think that a lot of the players on this defense might be a little bit overrated. And so, from a Madden perspective, you might look at these players and say, oh, well, I don't want to trade them away. I don't want to rebuild this defense. But realistically speaking, the way that this team is built now is not necessarily built for success. And to be quite honest with you guys, back when they were more successful, I think it was by building around Ezekiel Elliott and leaning on him more than anything. And so in recent memory, Jerry Jones has tried to put all of the talent, all the wide receiver talent and everything around Dak Prescott to try to get their passing game to be a top-notch passing game and let the running game go by the wayside, and kind of changed the identity of this team in a way that has not really helped them. And they weren't able to transition back to an Ezekiel Elliott heavy offense whenever Dak Prescott got injured, and that's what's hurt them this season. They should very well be winning this division very simply off of their offensive line and Ezekiel Elliott alone. I know that they've had injuries across the offensive line, but they have drafted young guys like Connor McGovern and Connor Williams, and a lot of young guys that should have success as high pedigree players that should have been able to step up and take over these positions across the offensive line without any trouble. So I don't know exactly what's going on that is causing the issues with this team, but it is a team that, in my personal opinion, needs a retooling and maybe a rebranding of what they're trying to do to have success. And so I think that the Cowboys are actually a really good option, because you could take this team and change their identity or mold their identity to be successful, and in doing so probably move on from some of their older talent and things like that to help develop this team into something that is a little bit more successful. The next team that I want to talk about is a team that is literally the definition of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. They've been doing it for how long now? How many years now? Decades. I just can't understand why the Lions are so inept at building a team. It just doesn't, and I apologize if that comes off harshly to those that might be Lions fans, But they need to move on from Matt Stafford. I know everybody says that when he's healthy and when he has the players around him, he looks like a fantastic player, but he just ain't it at this point. He's 32 years old. He's not getting any better than what you've already seen out of him. And with that being said, they've failed to build around him. They haven't brought in players that are going to run the ball effectively. I don't know why they stink so bad at finding a good running back. The Kerryon Johnson experiment was a failure. All of the running back experiments before that were a failure. To be quite honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if DeAndre Swift was a failure of an experiment. But there is a lot of potential there for DeAndre Swift, so that's a good building block to have there to potentially build around. And personally speaking, I think that this team needs to find a good way to run the football before they decide to go out and go pass heavy like they've tried to do. Now, they do have young players like Kenny Galladay at the wide receiver position, but they're still trying to go with older players like Marvin Jones Jr., who's 30 years old, Danny Amendola, who's 34 years old, and it doesn't get any younger from there. 27-year-old Marvin Hall, 31-year-old Mohamed Sanu. I mean, it's just, for a team that is not that good to begin with, to go the route of aging veterans to help support your, struggling quarterback and struggling offense is not necessarily the way to go. TJ Hawkinson has emerged as a great player, but they continue to have struggles across the offensive line, even though they've invested into that position in the past with high draft picks like players like Taylor Decker. This team needs to revamp their offensive line. They need to be able to protect whatever quarterback they bring in, and they continue to have struggles across the defensive side of the ball as well. With failed draft picks like Gerard Davis, who hasn't lived up to expectations and things like that, this team just does not have the talent necessary to compete and to continue to go the age route like they're doing. Bringing in guys like Desmond Trufant, it's just not the play. I don't know why they continue to do this, but with that being said, it presents the perfect opportunity in Madden to try to rebuild this team and do it correctly. Bringing in these aging players, Duron Harmon, you look at Desmond Trufant, the other ones that I've named here, that's not the play for the Lions. The Lions need a legitimate reboot, and they need to find true building blocks to build around as they move forward. And so the Lions are number 8 on my list. The 9th team on my list is a team that, again, another team that needs to find a quarterback, but a team that actually does have some talent, and that's going to be the Chicago Bears. So they do have Khalil Mack, who is obviously a force on the defensive side of the ball, even paired with guys like Eddie Jackson and Kyle Fuller, who have been studs on the defensive side of the ball. So they don't need a lot of development on the defensive side of the ball, but what I will say is that those guys are aging. And so when you look at this team, by the time you find the right offensive pieces, because they don't have a quarterback, in my opinion, they don't have a halfback that's going to be successful. They've kind of swung and missed at those positions, and the only good receiver that they've had in forever has been Allen Robinson. They don't have the players on the offensive side of the ball to be successful, and it's going to take a lot to find those players. They do have a decent offensive line to put those guys behind, but by the time you do develop this offense, your aging defensive players are going to be on their way out. I mean, you look at their starters on the defensive side of the ball, and they're really getting up there in age outside of Roquan Smith. And so this is a team that definitely needs a rebuild, because even if you just rebuilt the offense, your defense would start to be aging and be to the point where you're going to be looking to move on from all of these players. So they kind of need an entire rebuild of the team altogether. And so this is a team that I like quite a bit, because you do have these players that are aging that you could trade away, a Kyle Fuller or something like that, that you could trade to another team that is competing, or a Nakeem Hicks maybe. Players that will add a lot of value to a competitive team that you could get a reasonable price back for and help build this team up to where they need to be. And it all starts with the quarterback position. Nick Foles is not the answer at the quarterback position. Neither is Mitchell Trubisky. And again, they keep trying to go this route, and it's not doing them any favors. They need to cut ties with them sooner than later and find the next option. That's what I have to say about the Chicago Bears, and we're going to move on to the last team on this list, which might be a bit of a surprise to people, but we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons, to me, are a team that have been screaming for a retooling or a rebuild or whatever you want to call it. They need to change what they're doing. They need a turnover with most of their personnel, in my personal opinion, because ever since they blew that Super Bowl lead and lost the Super Bowl, they're 28-31 as a franchise. They haven't had much success at all, and honestly, they're on a downward trend. Now, don't get me wrong, I like players like Matt Ryan and I love Julio Jones, but it just ain't it. They need to find the next guy after Matt Ryan that'll give them a cheaper option and potentially allow them to build up at other positions. Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, they're fantastic wide receivers. They also have young guys like Russell Gage who are potentially going to be stepping up, and they need to continue to bolster their offensive line. And they need to rebuild their defense, because I think their defense is one of their biggest problems at this point. Guys like Dante Fowler not getting it done. Grady Jarrett is a good player to build around, but their linebacking core isn't great outside of Deion Jones and maybe Olakun. Their defensive backs, they lost Desmond Trufant, who has been kind of a cornerstone for them. They did bring in A.J. Terrell, who could potentially be a really good replacement corner for them, but they need help on the defensive side of the ball still. And this is a team that, like I said, they've had a lot of failure after losing that Super Bowl and haven't managed to really do much with the talent that is here. And so again, that's a team that is looking to be primed for a rebuild, a team that has talent but isn't able to utilize it. And Matt Ryan's going to be gone in Madden after a year or two, because he's only an 85 at this point. And they need to find the next quarterback, and they need to be able to build around that quarterback. And so that is why they are number 10 on my list, and a team that I think a lot of people should look at as potentially a rebuild team, and a team that I think would be fun to rebuild, because you might still get a couple of good years out of Julio Jones, and then you have fantastic other players behind them to be able to throw the ball to and utilize to develop a young quarterback. Imagine bringing in a rookie quarterback that has Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Russell Gage to throw to. That quarterback has no choice but to be successful. And so that's why this is a good rebuild team, because if you want a player that has the tools around them, if you want a team that is going to be able to bring in a quarterback that has the tools around them to succeed, this is the team to do it. If you find your quarterback immediately, you find your quarterback maybe in the first draft, you're going to be able to be successful with this team, because that quarterback is going to have all the tools in the world, and you might just need to help out your offensive line a little bit to protect that young quarterback. So with that being said, hopefully this information is useful to you guys. Like I said, let me know in the comment section what you guys think, teams that you would have on this list, teams that you don't agree with that should be on this list. Like I said, all in good fun. Somebody suggested this or requested this video, so I just wanted to put together a list of 10 teams that I would have fun rebuilding, 10 teams that I think have a lot of potential for rebuilds and have reasons to be rebuilt. So with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you guys have a good night.